In 1998, Marvel launched the Marvel Knights line with a new ongoing Black Panther series from writer Christopher Priest. The book would go on to become a critical darling, with many labeling it the best comic that you're not buying. Sadly, Marvel couldn't help but focus a little too much on the predicate part of that statement, and the book would end up being cancelled after 62 issues.
Still, the book garnered enough attention that Marvel's burgeoning movie division had begun pitching Black Panther to Hollywood, with both Wesley Snipes and Will Smith being rumored to play T'Challa.
So imagine fans' excitement when in 2005 a new ongoing Black Panther series was announced. Then imagine their disappointment when the news broke that Christopher Priest was not going to be writing this book.
Instead, writing chores would fall to filmmaker Reggie Hudlin, best known for comedies like Boomerang and House Party. To put it simply, fans were not particularly happy when Marvel decided that Priest's redefining run would instead be tossed aside in favor of a pitch from one of the people behind Bebe's Kids.
It's animation.
Now, Hudlin's run was not entirely bad. For example, his first story arc saw the introduction of the now very popular supporting character of T'Challa's sister Shuri. Though, unlike her Marvel Cinematic Universe counterpart, the two are much closer in age and she is not a teenager. He also introduced a new villain called the Cannibal, who was a body possessor who was attempting to infiltrate the Wakandan government. It was part of many attempts by the United States government to make Wakanda look weak so they could swoop in, save the day, and get some type of favorable trade agreement. It hasn't really worked so far. Of course, neither of these things are what the run is most noteworthy for.
The series' second story arc dealt with T'Challa deciding it was time to settle down and get married. He then began crossing the United States looking for one particular woman alongside other minority heroes like Blade, Brother Voodoo, and Shang-Chi, while fending off Shang-Chi's father, who wanted Black Panther to become his son-in-law. However, in the end, the love of T'Challa's wife would turn out to be none other than Aurora Monroe, aka Storm of the X-Men. The two had a brief relationship as teenagers when she was part of a ring of thieves and he was out on walkabout.
Though the notion of Marvel's two preeminent African superheroes getting married did garner quite a bit of mainstream attention from the press, Marvel even going to the extent of hiring legendary designer Vera Wang to work on Storm's dress, the whole thing just really reeked of a bad publicity stunt.
Making matters worse, as soon as T'Challa and Aurora were married, Marvel basically started trying to break the two up. First, the two got entangled in the Civil War event, siding with Captain America, who lost. Then they filled in for Reed and Sue Richards from the Fantastic Four while those two were working on their strained relationship. And finally, Storm elected to stay with the X-Men for a while, and T'Challa wanted her to be back in Wakanda to, continue the legacy.
That's not an entirely sexist statement. That's just something that's expected of a woman when she marries into royalty. Still, Black Panther and Storm were still married at this point as we look at Reggie Hudlin's final arc on this volume of Black Panther in which T'Challa returns to take on an old foe. This is Black Panther, Back to Africa.
A mysterious ship has appeared in Wakandan waters, and Shuri has led a team out to investigate. She makes her way on board and locates the vessel's control room. It's then that she spots someone before getting caught. T'Challa is contacted about his sister's capture. He's already not in a good mood after his first rout with Storm, and now even his mother is taking him to task over recent events. It's then that his cousin, who is one of Shuri's escorts, informs the king of who was on board the ship. Meanwhile, in the neighboring nation of Uganda, a large crocodile-human hybrid attacks two villagers in the river. It's then that the beast is taken out by the new protector of the nation, Killmonger.
So, unlike his Marvel Cinematic Universe counterpart, Killmonger, or N'Jadaka, is not part of the Wakandan royal family. Rather, he's an orphan whose parents were killed by Wakandan insurgents. These insurgents then adopted N'Jadaka and trained him into becoming the ultimate weapon in order to take down T'Challa. Though he's never followed through completely on this, he is considered the one person the Black Panther has never truly beaten.
Shuri is being held in a cell with her other escort, Kamal. As she struggles to break free, he confesses his long-held feelings for her. She's not really having any of it, though, and warns him not to try anything while she falls asleep. As this plays out, T'Challa contacts U.S. Secretary of Defense Tony Stark about Killmonger's presence in Uganda. Stark denies any knowledge of these events, but promises to find out which Americans are behind his return. In Uganda, Killmonger squares off with the military government. They may be better armed, but he manages to take out all of them but one. Soon, everyone is beginning to rally to the side, and he's successfully led a coup d'etat. Of course, none of this is exactly what Killmonger's American backers have wanted. Now they've called in Tony Stark to help clean up their mess. So he sends in
It's Monica Rambeau.
Monica rushes into the Ugandan capital, but Killmonger is being protected by some type of force field. Killmonger then sends a message to T'Challa. If he wants business done, he needs to do it himself, as Monica Rambeau is now also his hostage. She tries to escape, bending the light as to give an illusory attempt at an escape, but Killmonger just adjusts the entrapment field accordingly. All of this has completely befuddled T'Challa. None of this technology is capable of anything that the United States has produced, and while he is very smart, neither is Killmonger capable of doing anything like this before. Killmonger continues rallying Uganda, promising to get Wakanda to open its borders and share its technology to the benefit of all of Africa. He then pays a visit to Shuri and lets several long-term and repressed prisoners into her cell.
Ew.
Even when chained to the wall, Shuri and Gamal prove more than enough to hold off those who wish to violate them. Meanwhile, Wakanda prepares for invasion, aiming to have as little civilian casualties as possible. To that end, T'Challa is using some lower-tier tech to avoid being caught by Killmonger. He even uses a tunneling machine acquired from longtime Fantastic Four villain the Mole Man to stage an underground incursion. Soon he's reached Killmonger, and the two are ready to square off again. However, Killmonger won't take the Panther on unless T'Challa promises to give aid to Uganda no matter whether he wins or loses. Unbeknownst to him, this whole confrontation is a smokescreen so Wakandan Black Ops can break Shuri and Gamal free. The group then sets to locate Killmonger's technological puppet master. T'Challa does call Killmonger's bluff and promises aid in Uganda. As the two prepare for final conflict, Shuri and Gamal head back to Wakanda holding hands. The remaining Black Ops group breaks through the vault they've tracked Monica Rambeau's energy signature to. Inside, they find a lab full of animal experiments, like the crocodile men from earlier. In the center of the lab is the one behind everything, a large super-intelligent baboon.
Okay, so I know that there is a Marvel supervillain called the Mandrill, who is a human who slowly mutated into a Mandrill-like person over time and uses his pheromones to seduce women. But this isn't actually him, this is a different creature. I mean, I know mandrills and baboons are related, but not in this case. This is an entirely different character. In fact, all of these animal-human hybrids, like the crocodile men, are the product of another low-level Marvel villain called the Red Ghost.
The baboon is torturing Monica and can generate the force field, so no gunfire is going to work. However, Monica is able to use her abilities to detect a small defect in the containment field. She shrinks down and wriggles through the crack. She then makes quick work of the baboon and heads to the surface. Just as it looked like Killmonger has gotten the upper hand by confiscating T'Challa's sword and preparing for a killing blow, Monica then literally blasts through Killmonger's chest, killing him. A young soldier steps forward and tells T'Challa to back away from the body. He is the son of N'Jadaka, and he will carry on his father's revenge. Meanwhile, Shuri and Gamal make it back to Wakanda and are being looked at a hospital. It's just a routine checkup to see if anything was planted on them by Killmonger. Still, Dr. Voodoo wants to make sure.
Jericho Drum is a Haitian sorcerer who can tap into the realm of the dead to augment his abilities, like his power, his strength, and his ability to possess people. Now, he's normally been known as Brother Voodoo. However, at this point, Doctor Strange had actually ceded the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme to him, so he's now known as Dr. Voodoo.
Dr. Voodoo confronts Gamal. He knows the truth. He's actually been possessed by the cannibal this whole time. The attempted kiss with Shuri was to try to take over her body and kill T'Challa. The cannibal attempts to possess Dr. Voodoo only for something to mysteriously block him. Voodoo then pulls out a syringe of poison and the two begin struggling with each other. The commotion brings in the authorities, and what they find is Gamal's dead body laying next to the dead body of a Skrull in Dr. Voodoo's clothing.
Yes, this is all meant to be a lead-in for the next story arc, which was a tie-in to the Secret Invasion event. However, that's not what ends our story here. Rather, we actually get a one-shot annual appearance at this point, which, okay, this leads a bit to a confusing moment for me, as every listing I saw put this annual as being last in the story. However, when I bought this on Comixology, the annual was somehow moved to first. Sometimes Comixology will do that, but I don't know if it's an alphabetical thing or maybe just it got misplaced. So I put it here last just because that's where the reference points all point to.
A few decades into the future, Ororo and T'Challa are preparing for the wedding of their son T'Chaka to Danielle Cage, the daughter of American President Luke Cage. This wedding will serve a major political alliance between the two national powers. There's just one problem. The younger brother of the groom, Tawari, has gone missing just before the wedding. Storm goes looking for her wayward child and finds him sulking near a waterfall. Tawari views this entire wedding as just a political stunt to appease the United States.
Yeah, the world building's a little off-kilter throughout this. It does happen a little bit throughout the issue, but it took me a couple read-throughs to realize that T'Challa's son is marrying the daughter of Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. So, again, it's not very well told, unfortunately.
Ororo explains to her youngest son the history of Wakanda during the colonization and slave trade of Africa. When invaders touched Wakandan soil, they were met with quick rejection. Still, there was great debate as whether or not to involve their matters with other African nations. The Wakandans tried moving subtly, attempting to purchase slaves and then train them militarily to set them free. But eventually the world powers caught on to their act and began attacking slave ships as they arrived in the harbor. This led to more fighting until the colonizers began to align together. Seeing that the numbers game would eventually catch up, Wakanda chose to withdraw from the world stage. Returning to the present, Aurora points out that had Wakanda held out and possibly won, in reality they probably would have just turned into the type of empire that they were fighting. They needed to take the long haul and hope that the world would eventually catch up to their philosophy, which it would over time. Then came the superhuman civil war in America. When Stark and his side won that conflict, they began to turn to more international affairs. Latveria and Doctor Doom were the first to fall, and then came Namor and Atlantis. Wakanda was next on the list. The battle was intense, with Tony Stark donning a massive Iron Man suit to take on a giant Panther mech. However, the stress of the battle proved too much for Tony Stark, who suffered a massive heart attack and died. The death of Tony Stark polarized both sides into trying peace once more, with T'Challa retiring as Black Panther. In reality, most of this is pointless, as Ororo knows what Tawari's main problem is. He's jealous. Yeah, it's not exactly a secret that Tawari was in love with Danielle Cage for a long time, but never had the courage to work up his feelings, and now she's marrying his brother. Ororo tells her son to get over it and he'll meet the right girl someday, but ruining his brother's wedding is not going to change or help matters at all. The two return and the wedding goes off without a hitch.
Of course, none of this would really happen anyway, since T'Challa and Ororo's marriage would eventually be annulled because comic book publishers really do hate marriage, I guess. Anyway, that concludes our look at Black Panther Back to Africa. How was it? Well, I do think there's some nice characterization throughout this story. I think everyone seems really spot on. I mean, you can draw some parallels between the motivations of Eric Killmonger in this and his MCU counterpart. And I do kind of like the overall story arc of Hudlin's American intervention plans that keep going awry. So I think that's well done. And I do think this does set up the next story arc, which is the Secret Invasion tie-in. It really does remind you of how well that hype train was for this. Except Secret Invasion stunk, but to each their own, I guess. And I will say this, the artwork is pretty decent. On the downside, I think the pacing of this story is off. I mean, it's just, the opening moves way too fast. There's way too much going on. It's something that should maybe have been spread out over a whole issue that gets summarized in like 5 pages. And it's so jerky and off-kilter throughout the whole thing. It doesn't really have a good flow to it at all, narratively. And I will say this, there's no Storm in this. I mean, she's featured on a couple of the covers for this storyline. She's barely in the book. I mean, outside of that annual issue, she's not really in it at all. It's just him trying to contact Storm and Storm not returning his calls. And it's like, well, then why is she on the cover? Like, again, it just makes that whole marriage feel really, really stupid in retrospect. It could have worked had they just dedicated themselves to it. Anyway. And last but not least, there's a tonal whiplash in that annual issue as well. I mean, it just feels so pointless. We go through this whole Wakandan history thing, but no, it's just because the brother's jealous. It just really felt hollow. And that's why I can't say this is bad, but it's not really that good either. I'm going to be giving Black Panther Back to Africa a C. Yeah, it's not a definitive Black Panther story by any stretch of the imagination. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. There, you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember, like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.